To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.
So my dear children, in the earlier chapter, right, we discussed about the nano, what kind of a thing is this nano is, and also we got a certain idea about the nanoscale and about the nanometer. Within this lesson part or within this chapter, we'll be mainly focusing about the nanotechnology then. Okay, the nanotechnology, nano concepts, right? So nanoscale science investigates the matter at critical range on 1 nanometer to 100 nanometer. So we have learned what this nanoscale is within the previous chapter. So my dear children, this nanotechnology is the science that we are about to discuss right now. So here within this science, within this technology, the critical state of matter, like from 1 nanometer to 100 nanometer, is being focused mainly from 1 to 100 nanometers, right? Making new things on this incredibly small scale is called nanotechnology. So making things, right, which is at this scale, making new things within this smaller scale, like up to 100 nanometers from 1 nanometer is referred to as the nanotechnology. And it's one of the most exciting and fast moving areas of science and technology today. So like I said, like I have introduced you within the previous chapter, my dear children, it is an advanced technology which is readily getting developed within our modern society. Okay, I mean in our, when you take the science section or the science sector, within this sector, the nanotechnology is now within these days, it's keep getting developed from time to time. Okay, so the nanotechnology is an enabling technology which has applications in diverse areas from biology to aerospace. So mainly, my dear children, when you take the nanotechnology, so we have discussed this thing in the earlier as well. You know that nanotechnology mainly focus about the, okay, it is going to mainly focus about the development of nanoscale machines. Right, nanoscale machine means, my dear children, like up to 1 nanometer to 100 nanometer. So this is a very critical range for the atoms. That's why it is very important. And the other thing is that when you can create simple machines at that kind of a tiny world, or within that kind of a tiny world, the specialty is that, my dear children, these things can be utilized in different sections and different areas in our normal day-to-day life, especially my dear children, in our biological field or in biomedical field. And also it is going to spread not within the biological or biomedical field, my dear children, but also in a vast area like in aerospace and also transportation, then agriculture, then development of certain machines and so on, right? So we'll be discussing about those advantages when you go further with the lesson part. Okay, so nanotechnology means, my dear children, okay, as I have underlined here, making new things on this incredibly small scale, which is the nanoscale, right, is called the nanotechnology. So here we are focusing about the critical range of the atoms and particles from 1 nanometer to 100 nanometer. So I hope that you got the idea about the nanotechnology then, right? Then the history of nanotechnology. So we have got an idea about nanotechnology in the previous slide. Now we are going to discuss who are the first scientists and who are the first authors, pioneers that gave the idea to the world about these nanoparticles and the nano machines. So we'll be discussing this thing as given with the slide over here when we are discussing about the history. So let's go for the history of nanotechnology, and we'll identify the people who gave this idea, who introduced this science to the world. Okay, right. So here it is given, nanoscience and technology are not new concepts to the nature. There are many natural phenomena based on nanotechnology. So this is not a wonder, my dear children. I mean, like, there since the beginning of the world, these things were there. I mean, like, natural nanotechnological things, nanotechnology or nanoparticles were there in our environment. However, right, these things were natural things, no? So, however, people should have to understand these concepts, this technology, and should represent or introduce this thing to the world. Even though those technologies were there in the environment, right, people haven't got any idea about those things until the recent time, until recent years. Okay, however, these things were there within the environment because of the natural methods or natural nanotechnological things. Okay, however, the American physicist Richard Feynman, right, so American physicist Richard Feynman, he was lived during the period of 1918 to 1988, is credited with the kick-starting modern interest in nanotechnology. So that means, my dear children, this person, the American scientist Richard Feynman, he was the first person to introduce about these things to the world. I mean, like, just as a concept even, right? He was the first person to introduce. So he lived during the era of 1918 to 1988. So he was the first and foremost person to speak about this technology, about the nanotechnology. Then in 1959, in his after dinner speech called "There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom," Feynman speculated about and public speaking, should be right, about a public speaking, right? In your textbook also there's a small bit of a problem in here, so I'll erase this thing, right? So there is a plenty of room at the bottom. Feynman speculated about a public speaking, incredibly tiny world where people could use atoms and molecules as tools to make things. Now, Richard Feynman was the physicist, lived in the time period of 1918 to 1988 in America or USA. So he gave a certain speech, after dinner speech, in 1959, my dear children, right? So this was the first time where this kind of a thing was spoken in our modern world. Okay, so in 1959, in his after dinner speech called "There's Plenty of Room at the Bottom." So the topic of the speech was "There's plenty of room at the bottom." That was the topic. So under that topic, Feynman speculated about a public speaking, incredibly tiny world where people could use atoms and molecules as tools to make things. So he was given with an idea to the world that these molecular level kind of machines and things can be utilized, right, to do the works of human beings. So he speculated this thing. He gave the idea to the modern world about this thing for the first time with the speech of this "There's plenty of room at the bottom" thing. So this speech was given in 1959, right? So from that, we got the idea about the nanotechnology in simple, my dear children, molecular level machines, right? In 1974, Japanese engineering professor Norio Taniguchi named this field nanotechnology. So after that, my dear children, this certain science, right, this certain science or this particular area of studying molecular level machines, this field was named as nanotechnology in 1974. So this was done by Japanese engineering professor Norio Taniguchi. So he was the person which named this field as the nanotechnology. Okay, as the nanotechnology. He was the person who named this field as the nanotechnology. Norio Taniguchi, a Japanese engineering professor, okay, during the year 1974. So this is how the nanotechnology came to our world. Okay, this is how the nanotechnology came to our world. So like I said, my dear children, it's like within our recent times. First and foremost, even within a like in a, like over there, actually the field was even not named yet. However, the name, that molecular machine kind of a thing, even given to our world within the year 1959, my dear children. Okay, so I think you know that when you take about the atoms and molecules, the atoms and the molecules were, the idea about these atoms and molecules were given in late 1700s, right? Can you remember? When we are discussing about the structure of atom, we discussed that John Dalton was the first scientist to introduce about these structures, I mean like the atom kind of thing to the world, right? And even before that, right, the Democritus, right, like when you take the philosophers introduce, right, this thing called as these smaller particles as atoms to the world. So atoms were given like several atoms has a very vast history, like it is going to go until the Democritus era, right? However, like the philosophers, however, these machines which can be used to treat, or else which can be utilized in making simple machines, very smaller machines, like in the molecular level, this technology got developed I mean like the world heard about this kind of a technology during recent times, my dear children. It doesn't have that much of a heavy history, right? That kind of a thing, that kind of an idea even heard during the year 1959. So in 1974, like after 15 years, right, like after 15 years, this field was named as the nanotechnology, like in 1974. So 1974, like I said, my dear children, it's like in recent years, right? Okay, so this is how the history of nanotechnology, right? This is how the history of nanotechnology is been, I mean like this is how the history of nanotechnology came to the this is what are the things which are these are the things that are referring to the history of nanotechnology then. Okay, it has a very brief history, as it is not going to run like several years back. Okay, right then. So nanotechnology truly took off in 1980s. So after naming and after getting an idea in 1950s and after naming this thing in 1970s as the nanotechnology, this thing really took off in the world in 1980s. During the 1980s, my dear children, this thing really took off in the world. I mean like during those times, these things were given as simple ideas. However, during 1980s, like most of the people, most of the advanced technicians and scientists, they got the idea about this nanotechnology. So it was really took off in 1980s, right? So that was when nanotech individualist Dr. K. Eric Drexler first published his groundbreaking book, Engines of Creation, the coming era of nanotechnology. Now in 1980s, my dear children, right, the person, Dr. K. Eric Drexler, he published a certain book named as the Engines of Creation, right, the coming era of nanotechnology. So by that book, this Dr. Drexler introduced the nanotechnology to the whole world. So it really took off in 1980s. So nanotechnology could not really took off until the electron microscope become popular, right? So however, even though those things were given to the world, even though the ideas were given to the world by books or any speeches or any other methods, right, it doesn't came a reality. It's mainly because we haven't had any kind of an instrument to observe such kind of molecules or atoms. However, with the development of the electron microscopy, you have heard about the electron microscope, right? So that is the most sensitive microscope that the man has developed up to now, electron microscope. So by using the electron microscope, my dear children, we can even observe atoms, right? By using electron microscope, we can even observe not all the atoms, some atoms can be observed with some molecules. Okay, right. So with the help of development of the electron microscopy, right, what has happened? Nanotechnology really took off, right? Then it was also the decade when microscopes that were capable of manipulating atoms and molecules on the nanoscale were discovered. So you know that microscope is normally used to observe things. We can do a certain observation, that's it. But however, that time period, my dear children, at that era, right, different kinds of microscopes were developed with different instruments and structures so that they can manipulate these atoms and molecules. Okay, so these instrument had the ability to manipulate, that means change the positions of atoms and other molecules in order to make their needed structures. Okay, so here it was also the decade when microscopes that were capable of manipulating atoms and molecules on the nanoscale were discovered. So at that time, during that time, my dear children, what has happened? Special kinds of microscopes that can manipulate the things were also developed. Here in the things means nanoscale things like molecules and atoms. Okay. Then you are given with two figures about the two different scientists. First figure shows the Richard Feynman. Can you remember? He was the first person to introduce about this nanotechnology, right? He haven't used the nanotechnology term, but however, he introduced that the molecular machines could be used in the future. Okay, molecular level machines could be used in the future. Richard Feynman, right? So he gave this idea in 1959 by using a speech. Okay, then here is given the other picture. Eric Drexler, Dr. Eric Drexler can be observed in the second figure, my dear children. So he was the person to write about, right? He was the person to write a book about what? Here it is given. So the blue color area, you can see it, the engines of creation. So he was the first person to write about the nanotechnology, right? So he wrote a book that called the engines of creation, the coming era of nanotechnology. Then over there, He introduced about the nano concepts and the molecular machines in detail, right, by using the book of his, right. Then here it is given, likewise nanotechnology will, once it get underway, depend on the tools we have then and our ability to use them, and not on the steps that got us there. Eric Drexler. So he told that finally, likewise, right, this is just a quote from his book. Likewise, nanotechnology will, once it gets underway, depend on the tools we have, then our ability to use them, and not on the steps that got us there, right? So a term or else a phrase that can be observed within the book that the Eric Drexler published, right? So this is the brief history about nanotechnology then. So it has a very brief history, my dear children. I mean, like, the history is not that much longer. It's because it came to the world like in very recent times. Right, my dear children. So this is about the history of nanotechnology. So let's head on to see what are the other contents given. So now I told you that, my dear children, these nano concepts and nanotechnological things were there in our environment, right, were there in our environment, our natural environment, for long time period. However, these concepts were not identified. Now, when the time is going to pass by, people have identified these things. So now we are going to investigate one of those nanotechnological things, nanotechnological concepts that we can observe within our normal natural environment. Okay, right? So to identify about this thing, we're going to do a certain activity. So here it is given, our main topic, natural nano concepts. Natural nano concepts. So nature has created things of nanoscale. So let us do the activity given to get an idea of such things and their functioning. So like I said, our nature has these kinds of nanotechnological concepts. Our nature, our mother nature, is the first person to create these nanotechnological things to the world. However, human got idea about these nanotechnological things very later. Even he haven't got the idea about understanding these things at the beginning. But however, these things were there. Now we are going to investigate about one certain instance. So to do this thing, to do this activity, you'll be needing these materials then, right? You'll be needing a lotus leaf or else a colocasia leaf. In our terms, habarala. Okay? Or you'll be needing a habarala leaf or else a lotus leaf, right? So I'll write down the name. So here this is a lotus leaf. Or else you can use a habarala leaf. Right? You can use either of these two. If it is better if you can use the both of these things, right? Then you can observe it quite well. So what we are going to do here is, sometimes in the morning time period, if you have colocasia at your home, my dear children, if you have these things at your home, right? Sometimes like, you know, if you are living in a certain village, my dear children, right? So in that villages, you know, even in our home garden, some of these in some home gardens, clearly we can observe these plants, colocasia plants, right? So these plants or habarla plants, right, we even use the yams of this habarla as our food, right? So what you have to do is, you have to put some water drops and observe what will happen to the water drops. So usually when you pour water into other leaves, usually some amount of water is getting retained within the surface. Some amount of water is getting definitely retained within the surface. I mean, like their wetness can be even touched by our hands. We can touch and feel the wetness within the leaves. It's because water is getting stick on the surface, my dear children. That's the main reason. Water is getting stick on the surface. Okay, that's the main reason of, retaining water within these. However, colocasia and also lotus, both of these leaves have a special kind of a feature. When water is being poured onto their surfaces, water is not even retaining on the surface. Water drop is totally getting, right, transported, or totally getting travel to a different location, or it's get down to the ground. Like, we won't be able to even observe the wetness within the leaf. I mean, like when you touch it, you won't be able to observe the wetness. It's completely getting removed. Not even one single drop is going to retain within the leaf. Okay. I think in the morning time period, like I said, usually colocasia plants can be observed in our home garden if you are living in a certain village, my dear children. Okay. During the morning time period, if you have these things at your home, go and observe during the morning time period, not in the evening or daytime, my dear children. In the morning time period, go and observe a plant leaf, Haberla plant leaf. Definitely at the middle, you might observe water droplets. If you touch the surface of the Haberla, then you won't be able to observe, right? You won't be able to observe the wetness, right? However, in the other plant leaves, you will have the, you will definitely observe the wetness. Now, what is the reason for this? Why it is going to happen? It's because, my dear children, these leaves, they have nanoscale level particles. These nanoscale level particles have the ability to repel the water drop and transport it to a different location. So as these particles are in nanoscale, water molecules will not have the ability to stick into the surface. Okay, the water molecule will entirely drop down to the ground. So this is the reason for it. Okay, so we'll be doing this thing and we'll be investigating about these leaves for sure. Okay, so now first of all, let's identify and let's see how to do this activity, my dear children. Then we'll write down the observation. Then we'll further clarify about these things when you go further with the lesson part. Okay, so you'll be needing lotus leaf or else a Haberla leaf for this experiment then. Okay, then the method is very simple. Like I said, it's very simple. What you have to do, you just take the plant leaf and pour some water drops into it and observe. That's it. Okay, so here let's write down the method. Take the plant leaf, and pour some water onto it and observe. So take the plant leaf and pour some water drops onto it and observe. Very simple. Take the leaf, pour some water and observe what is going to happen. Okay, so it's very simple. So my dear children, let's head on to see this activity and we'll see what is going to happen. Actually, it is going to happen or not. So my dear children, now I have with me a Haberla plant leaf. As you can see here, this is the plant which is called as Haberla. So I have prepared a small bit of a plant as well. right? So this is the Haberla plant leaf. This is also referred as taro yam or else colocasia. So the specialty here is that when you take the leaf of Haberla, right? So I have a bigger leaf in here, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some water from this dropper and I'm going to drop it like this. See? So if I'm going to put it like this, so if I'm going to drop it like this, observe how the water drops are getting collected onto the leaf. See? Now you can see the water drop in the middle of the leaf, right? And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to gently, see, I'm going to gently pour that water into the basket once more. Now when I'm touching it, right, as you can see, it's very clear to us. We won't be able to observe the wetness. Even though I'm pouring water onto the surface of the leaf, I can't feel any wetness. As you can see here, if I'm going to drop it like this, the water drops are getting poured down to the beaker once more, right? And you can clearly observe that the nature of the surface, nature of the leaf of the Haberle plant leaf is not trapping or not contacting with water. Even though it is getting contacted, right? So you can see that the water drops are getting repelled from the surface without any trouble. And we won't be able to feel any wetness on the surface too. It's because of the hydrophobic nature of the plant leaf. So this hydrophobic nature is the one which is referred as the lotus effect. So in here, my dear children, the surface of the leaf is having nanoparticles that can repel the water molecules. So if you put water into the surface like this, you won't be able to, right, see that water drops get in contact. I mean, like, it's getting contacted, but however, it's not getting retained with the plant leaf. See, there is no attraction between the water drop and the plant leaf surface. It's because of the hydrophobic nature. So if I'm going to pour it like this, without any trouble, I can pour that water drop once again to the water beaker and there is no wetness on the surface. So this is, what do you mean by the lotus effect, my dear children? So not only colocasia leaf or else Haberle leaf, this effect can also be observed within the lotus plant leaf also. So that is why especially it is referred as the lotus effect. Okay, right. So I hope that you got the idea of the lotus effect, my dear children. So let's head on to the classroom once more and we'll study the further things related to the lesson. Right, my dear children. So we did the experiment and you could clearly observe that water is not retaining on the surface, right? Water is not retaining on the surface over there. Water is dropping down without retaining on the surface, right? Water is not remained. Water is not retained within the surface. It's pouring down. Okay. Right then. So write down our observation. Water is not retained on the surface of the leaf so by that way, so my dear children, it's not getting retained on the surface of the leaf. So by that way, we can come into a special conclusion. What is that? These leaves have nanoscale particles. Okay. Because of that, water is not retaining within the leaf. That's the conclusion that we can take from the activity then. So, conclusion, I'll write it in here. Leaf contains nanoscale that can repel water molecules. Right, that can repel water molecules. That can repel means that can remove. Okay, right. So leaf contains nanoscale structures that can repel. Actually, repel means, my dear children, it's not getting water is not getting stick to the surface. Okay, repelling means actually in here these structures has the ability to remove. Okay, to remove, not to get stick, but to remove water molecules from the surface of the leaf. So this is the final conclusion that we can take from the activity. So observation, very simple, water is not retained on the surface of the leaf. Then the conclusion, leaf contains nanoscale structures that can repel water molecules. So this is a good example where we can identify nano concept in our nature. These plant leaves, like Haberle plant leaves and lotus plant leaves, they have some structures, special structures within the surface of the leaf. And these structures are helpful in removing water molecules totally from the surface. So the water is not getting stick on the surface at all. Okay, right. So my dear children, so here it is given. Did you see that water droplets roll on the leaf without sticking and spreading on it? What can be the reason for this? So like I said, we did this experiment, my dear children. So you can clearly observe that when you pour water, it's getting spreaded. It's mainly because, like I said in the conclusion, these surface, right? This leaf surface contains nanoscale particles. So these have the ability to repel water molecules from one place to another. Okay. So this effect is referred to as the lotus effect. Okay. The lotus effect, my dear children. In this lotus effect, my dear children, there are structures within the, right? So within the leaf surface, my dear children, there are structures. These structures have the ability to actually remove or to not to stick molecules, water molecules on the surface. This particular lotus effect. These particles the structures are very tiny. Now, what is going to happen here is the water molecule. You know that water molecule is made up with one oxygen atom and two hydrogen atoms. So this particular molecule, when it is going to hit on the surface, like this way, there are very tiny structures like this on the surface. Even we won't be able to observe it because these structures are at the nanoscale. So the water molecule is like this. Now when the water molecule is going to come and hit on this particular surface, it's going to fall down. And now you might think that what will happen if the water molecule come and hit on the gap in between those two particles? And now that's the wonder comes. The gap between the two particles are not enough, right? Are not the smaller gap between two particles are not enough to reach one particular water molecule. So it's like this. Now, will you be able to insert a tennis ball into this gap? You won't be able to insert, right? So it's like this. These are the two structures which is present, nanostructures present within the lotus or the colocasia plant, right? So when you throw a ball, right, like a tennis ball onto these structures, what will happen? The tennis ball will hit on this surface and definitely it will bounce back to a different location. The same thing is going to happen for the water molecule as well. Right? So the water molecule will not have the ability to jump into these spaces because the space is very tiny and even a water molecule will not be able to reach that level. So the water molecule come and hit on this surface, these particular nanostructures, and will travel to or will repel to a different location. They will bounce back by hitting on these structures. So that's how this lotus effect or this particular effect is going to work, right? So here it is given how the water droplets are retained on a lotus or else a colocasia leaf, right? A haberla leaf. So the leaf cleansing activity of lotus leaves, because of the hydrophobic condition, right? Hydrophobic condition on its surface is known as the lotus effect. So like I said, my dear children, this hydrophobic effect, not retaining water effect, okay, this ability is referred to as the lotus effect. This is called as the lotus effect. So this hydrophobic nature on the lotus leaf is due to the fine arrangement of particles of nanoscale. So like I said, my dear children, there are on the leaf surface, there are structures which is at the nanoscale. So they have very arranged order. I mean, they are, the gap between these two structures are very small in nanoscale, right? So therefore what will happen, water molecules will not have the ability to go inside these structures or to go jump in between the gap between two structures. So therefore they will come and bounce back to a different location, water molecules. So because of this, water, dirt and microorganisms that fall on the leaf are automatically removed. Lotus effect can be seen in wings of insects like dragonflies. Now the next one, my dear children, right? So because of having these smaller level structures on the leaves, what will happen? Not only water, but also other dirt and other kinds of microorganisms also will not have the ability to come and pierce these leaves and go inside. So they will come and hit on these structures and will bounce back to a different location, right? So my dear children, this is called as the lotus effect. So the lotus effect is not observed only within these leaves, but it is also observed, my dear children, within the wings of insects like dragonflies. That means sometimes you might have seen that these dragonfly kind of organisms, when they fall onto a water surface, right, and if they can survive or if they can come out from the water surface, right, they have the ability just to flash their wings here and there, then just by in a flash they're going to fly away, right? But however, if other birds like organisms, if they fall into a watery area, then they won't have that ability just to flash their wings and travel, right? It's because that when you take the wings of birds and other larger organisms, they don't have this lotus effect. However, small insects like dragonflies, they have within their wings, they have the lotus effect. Okay, within their wings they have the lotus effect. So they can flash their wings here and there, then just by sudden they can fly off without any trouble. So this lotus effect is not only observed within lotus and acacia plants or haberla plants, but however it can also be observed within the feathers or within the wings. Okay, within the wings, not on feathers, within the wings, right? Within the wings of organisms like dragonfly. Okay, so this is about the lotus effect, right? Okay. So now you are given with 3 figures. Within these figures, you can observe that the arrangement of nanoscale level, the structures which is observed within the lotus leaf. So a water droplet on lotus leaf, stages of various scales. So this is how you can observe it in, like when you observe, this is how we can observe from your naked eye, right? The water droplet plant leaf. So when you go like 100 micrometers, you can observe it like this. The smaller ones are the water molecules. Then when you go like 1 micrometer, you can observe at like this. Okay, so this is one such a structure, nanostructure, right? So these nanostructures are helpful in repelling these water droplets to a different location, right? So this is called as the lotus effect, my dear children. Very helpful method, or very helpful concept for insects like dragonflies, and also for these plants, right? Then the lotus effect. So this is the first and foremost concept, right? Nanotechnological concept. Specialty here is that this is in nature we can observe, right? This can be observed in nature, within our natural environment we can observe it, right? Okay then, right, my dear children. The next one, other than that, is there any other examples for nature made nanomaterials? Of course there is. So now within this part we'll be investigating about those things, nature made nanomaterials. Let's see. The best example is the functions taking place inside the cell. A cell. You know that cell is a living structure. It is the basic functional and structural unit of life. All the organisms are made up with cells. Each and every organism in our world is made up with cells. Okay. Sometimes there are some organisms which are unicellular, so there are some organisms which are multicellular, my dear children. You already know these things, right? Even we studied about these concepts within our first lesson, when we are discussing about the structures of microorganisms, right? So, likewise given in here, the best example for nanomaterials, right? Best natural example for nanomaterial is the cell. So, if a cell is living, my dear children, then it should show the growth. It should have the ability to respirate. It should have the ability to excrete. It should have the ability to get nutrition and to produce energy within the cell. So like that way, there should be certain metabolic activities which is going to happen within the cell. We are living now. You know that we are living. I am a living organism. So if I am living, I am going to respire. I'm going to take oxygen gas and I'm going to convert my materials, I mean in simple food, into energy. By utilizing that energy, I'm going to communicate with the other people around me. Then, my dear children, I'm going to, when I'm doing these activities and when I'm doing my day-to-day activities, when I'm doing several chemical reactions within my body, like respiration, okay, some kinds of excretory materials or unwanted materials are created within my body, like carbon dioxide. So when I'm breathing out or when I'm exhaling, I'm removing this carbon dioxide to the environment. So this is the process in simple we referred as the excretion, right? So I'm excreting substances to the environment as I'm living. As I'm living, I'm respiring to produce energy in my body. Okay. Then, my dear children, I have the ability, or I have the I have a certain kind of a I need to get some amount of food. I have the ability to obtain food, right? I have the ability to get the nutrition that I need, right? So by getting that nutrition, I'm getting my energy. In simple, I'm consuming glucose, then I'm going to burn that glucose with the oxygen gas in my body, and I'm going to produce energy needed for my works. So these things are basic living features. Basic living features. In simple, my dear children, we can refer these things as metabolic activities. in simple. Okay. So if I'm living, I'm going to show these metabolic activities or living features. Then if a cell is also living, will the cell has this ability to show these kinds of features? Of course. Of course, the cell is showing these features, my dear children. Okay. Each and every cell is going to show these features. Otherwise, the cell is not living. If a cell is living, then cell should have the ability to show these features which I have mentioned earlier. All the cells in my body, they do the respiration process. All the cells in my body, they do the nutrition, or they receive the nutrition they want. All the cells in my body, they do the excretion. All the cells in my body, they provide or they get energy by respiration. So my dear children, now the wonder comes. What is that? I am a macroorganism, right? I am a macroorganism, means that you can see me. If I'm going to cut and open my body, then you can observe the lungs, which is helpful in exchanging gases to produce energy. You know that oxygen is required for the production of energy. So my lungs are helpful in retaining and receiving oxygen from my body. Okay. My respiratory system helps to receive oxygen and to remove carbon dioxide gas, which is also an excretory material. My hands are helpful in receiving food items, so the glucose necessary for the body is obtained. My mouth helpful in getting or in absorbing or in passing these things to the inside of my body. So like that way, there are different kinds of structures in my body which are helpful in metabolic activities. So my question is, if a cell is living, right? My question is, if a cell is living, then it should definitely show these features, metabolic reactions or metabolic activities. If so, what are the structures? Are there any structures that are helpful for the cell in maintaining these processes? Think about it. Like for me, lungs and respiratory system is helpful in doing the respiration. Like in the same way, is there any kind of a structure? Is there any kind of a system contained within a cell in order to help, right, for the respiration process? If so, my dear children, if there is a structure like that, then that structure should be definitely a nanomaterial for sure. Because here we are talking about the interior part of a cell, a part which is contained within the cell, a material, a substance which is contained inside the cell. So definitely it should be nano, right? Definitely it should be a nanomaterial. So are there any structures? Of course, my dear children. Otherwise, if there are no anything, right, if there are no any structure like that, then cells will not survive in the nature. So cell is composed of different nanomaterials. So it is a best example for the things, for the natural things that has natural nanomaterials. Okay, right then. So here, the best example is the functions taking place inside the cell, which is the structural and functional unit of living organisms. Remember, the size of the cell is not at nano size. We know that. The cell is not at the nano size. It is at the micro size, right? Micrometer size. Can you remember about the red blood cell? It is at the micro level, right? Micrometer level, not at the nano level. However, my dear children, the structures present within the cell, they should be nano. They should be nano for sure, right? Then, in a cell, large number of nanoscale biological processes like respiration, excretion, nutrition, growth and photosynthesis, right? Photosynthesis. There is a problem in your book also. Let's remake this thing. It should be photosynthesis. So, in a cell, a large number of nanoscale biological processes like respiration, excretion, nutrition, growth and photosynthesis are taking place continuously. So like I said, my dear children, we'll ignore about the photosynthesis. However, it is also important now. I mean, I'm not going to ignore it totally. It is important, but photosynthesis is only related with the plant cells, no? So we'll ignore about photosynthesis. Other features are also common for both plant and animals. That means what? Excretion, nutrition, respiration, growth. All of these features are relevant to plant cells and also to the animal cells as well. So to do these things, to do these metabolic activities, to do these life activities, each and every cell should have nanomaterials inside it. Okay, these nanomaterials are very helpful in doing these metabolic activities. So, cell organelle specially adapted for these biological functions can be considered as machines of nanoscale. Organelles. So, my dear children, you know our body contains organs. Our body contains organs. So, the structures which are present in our body, organs, right? Organs. Okay. So, my dear children, like I said, the organs in our body are helpful in maintaining our biological activities like respiration and excretion and other biological activities. There are several biological activities. No? For respiration, our respiratory system and lungs are very important for us. In the same way, for a cell, my dear children, for a cell, there are no organs in it. These structures which are helpful in maintaining biological activities in a cell, these nanomaterials contained within a cell which are helpful in maintaining the biological activities are referred to as not organs but organelles. Organelles. So organelles specially adapted for these biological functions can be seen within the cells, my dear children. These are nanomaterials. Means these things are at the nanoscale from 1 to 100 nanometers. Okay. So this is the specialty. So within our body, there are nanomaterials, nanomachines which are providing or which are giving support to live our life. In simple, my dear children, let's take a certain cell in our body. So, in order to survive that cell should definitely convert glucose into energy. So, when doing that, oxygen is being utilized. In simple, this glucose molecule is broken down into several simpler compounds and like carbon dioxide and water, and during that process energy is being produced. The specialty here is that to break down this molecule, nanomaterial level substances are being produced by nanomaterial level substances. Okay. So these structures are the ones which are referred to as organelles, which is found within our cells. So like that way, there are different kinds of organelles which are helpful in our metabolic activities. all of these organelles are going to perform a specific function within the cell. Okay, the specific functions are metabolic activities. So these metabolic activities are very important for the survival of the cell, right? So I'm going to give you certain kinds of I'm going to give out some certain figures to observe these organelles. Okay, so human cell, animal cell, plant cell, these things contain nanomaterials. These nanomaterials are very helpful in keeping their normal biological activities. Okay, right then. So like I said, my dear children, this is the inner structure of a cell. This is just a diagram. Inner structure, just a diagram. This diagram shows the electron microscopic view of a particular cell. Within this cell now you can observe the different kinds of smaller materials like structures present inside it. See, now these structures, these are the structures present within the cell. So like in our body, you know that our body is composed of different kinds of organs, lungs, heart, kidneys, pancreas, liver, right? Like that way, there are different kinds of organs contained inside our body. In the same way, the cell is also containing different kinds of organelles. Our body has organs, cells has organelles. Specialty here is that these organelles are at the nanoscale level. So let's see what are those organelles. So these things are like for your external knowledge, your advanced knowledge. Okay, so you can observe centrosomes, lysosomes, peroxisomes. Then like that way, here there are Golgi apparatus. Then ribosomes. So like that way, there is a nucleus, endoplasmic reticulum, then mitochondria, cilia. Like that way, there are different kinds of structures within a cell. So I'm not going to talk all about these things, my dear children. Let me take few of these things and explain their functions for you guys. If you take the nucleus is covering a very larger scale within a cell. So it is the one which is acting as the brain of the cell. Means that all the activities inside the cell is being controlled by this special structure called the nucleus. Nucleus is the one which is going to carry DNA and other genetic information. Within the nucleus, you can observe the DNA and other genetical information, right? Within the nucleus. So nucleus is the one which is behaving as the brain. So brain of the cell is the nucleus. It is the one which is giving commands to these simpler molecular level or simpler, actually those things are not molecular level, these things are at the nanoscale. So this nanoscale level, nucleus is the one which is commanding for these nanoscale level particles to do this, you do this, like that way. He's the one who is doing or arranging the jobs which is important to do for the survival of the cell. He's the one who is giving the command, like you do this, you provide this, you prepare this, like that way. Okay. Then my dear children, this tiny ribosome, these ones, ribosomes. Okay. So ribosomes have the ability to create proteins needed for the cell. Proteins are very important structures, right? It helps to fight against, that there are different kinds of microorganisms enter into our body, So one kind of a particular substance is viruses. So to fight against viruses, these proteins are very important. So ribosomes are helpful in production of those essential proteins to fight against the microorganisms, microbes who are, disabling or who are going to deactivate our entire, cell system. Okay, right. then endoplasmic reticulum, right? Those things are helpful in making lipids and also for the transportation of lipids. Endoplasmic reticulum. Then, my dear children, Golgi complexes, which is given in here. Golgi complexes or Golgi apparatus. They are the ones who is behaving as the packing and secretion materials. In simple, those are the ones who is helpful in excretion. They have the packaging system and an excretion system, and excretion, right? And also sometimes several secretions are also given out. Golgi complexes. Then, my dear children, the most important one, mitochondria. It is also referred as the powerhouse of the cell. Mitochondria. Mitochondria is the one which is going to help in doing respiration. Inside the mitochondria, glucose is being burnt with oxygen, and energy is getting produced within the mitochondria. Okay, mitochondria. So mitochondria is helpful in production of energy needed for the cell. So let me give you a interesting thing about mitochondria. Okay, at the beginning of our planet Earth, okay, at the beginning of our planet Earth, during the origin of our planet Earth first evolved, right? Our planet Earth first evolved the form of life, right? The first and foremost form of life evolved in our planet Earth was a bacteria, simple kind of bacteria, okay? And that bacteria were also, right, especially that bacteria were also anaerobic. That means it does not consume oxygen. However, when the time is going to pass by, aerobic bacteria and aerobic organisms were created. Okay. Specialty here is that, my dear children, this mitochondria, it has been revealed that this mitochondria is a free living bacteria during that time. At the creation of our planet Earth, it was a free living bacteria. During the development of these structures, I mean like complex cells, right? During the development of these kind of complex cells, mitochondria, like they had lived freely, but however during the development or during the development or else during the creation of these complex cells, okay, these cells, right, got the help of mitochondria, and now they are collaterally living inside the cell. This is a free living bacteria during the creation of the earth. Okay, so this bacteria, okay, this bacteria now came inside to the cells, these kinds of prokaryotic cells, right? These kinds of eukaryotic cells, right? Not prokaryotic cells. Now, prokaryotic cells and eukaryotic cells means, my dear children, in an eukaryotic cells, there is a cellular organizational level. But in some cells, we won't be able to observe organizational levels. Organizational levels means, my dear children, like this way, there are different kinds of structures, organelles. So, if it is having an eukaryotic cell, then that means, my dear children, it is well organized like this. If it is not having an organized cellular structure, then it is an prokaryotic cell, like a bacteria and a virus. Prokaryotic cells. Okay, these are eukaryotic cells because they have well developed organelle levels and structures. That's why. So this bacteria was earlier time, right? This was a bacteria. Mitochondrion was a bacteria, right? So with the evolution, this bacteria came inside the cells, and they, up to now, they are collaterally living inside our cells, in eukaryotic cells, right? Now, what is the benefit that the mitochondrion bacteria is going to receive when they are going to, or when they are coming inside to our cells? Benefit is that they receive all the feeding materials that they want for the lifetime. What they need to do is, now they just need to provide energy and utilize that thing for itself and provide the extra ones for the cell as well. Cell is going to provide all the materials, do this thing. Then mitochondria, it can utilize whatever the things that it want and also provide the unnecessary stuff to the cell. So they are collaterally living inside the cell now. Okay, one gift that we got from the evolution, free living bacteria inside our cells, right? So all of these structures, all of these organelles are nanoscale level, my dear children. So I hope that you got the idea. Okay, the best example for the nanomaterial things or nanomaterials contained in our environment. Okay, right, my dear children. So this is just a diagram, no? I mean, like, these structures, these are like structures, or these are the structures, these are the organelles that we can observe within the cells. However, these are diagrams. That means, my dear children, no one has, I mean, like, the real structures are way more different than this. These are just 2D diagrams. So let me show you an actual figure. Right, let me show you an actual figure. Actual figure means, my dear children, this is what you can see when you observe a cell in electron microscopic level. So let me show you that structure. So the actual view of a human cell using electron microscope, the actual view. As you can see, there are very tiny particles wandering here and there. All of these things are nanomaterials, my dear children. All of these things are nanomaterial. Now here you can observe the mitochondria. See that free living bacteria, the which one I have told you. So this is the real view of a human cell. Right? Human means animal cell. Real view of it. Okay? The real view. Actually, when you observe it through an electron microscope, you can get this kind of a diagram. As you can see, it's very much complex. See, it's not that much easy like the previous diagram. Now that diagram was given, right? That diagram was given for you guys, my dear children. Now, in order to get a certain idea, if you just going to look at this kind of a structure suddenly, then you won't be able to get any kind of an idea. So I have given that diagram just to get an idea, right, about the structures contained within a cell. So this is the actual cell. So see how much complex is it? It's a very complex structure. There are different nanomaterials that can be observed within the cell, the actual cell of a human being, right? So this is how you can observe it, like, you know, in a lesser zooming scale. When you zoom it in once, even more, you can observe it like this, the real structure. Okay, all of these materials contained within the cell are nanomaterials. So nature is providing wonders for us. Nature is producing wonderful things. However, these concepts even been identified by the human it has taken very long time to even identify these things, like in recent years. However, nature, it built these things at the beginning of the life. So my dear children, with that one, I'm going to finish up this chapter. So within this chapter, we discussed about the nanotechnology. Especially within the nanotechnology, we discussed about the natural nano concepts, my dear children. Over there, we discussed about the lotus effect and about the cells of humans and animals and plants. Okay, right then. So in the next chapter, we'll be discussing the further things related to the lesson part. Then we'll be discussing why this nanoscale is this much important. What is the importance of nanoscale? Why do we need to go for the nanoscale, right, when doing these things? I mean, like, what is the importance? Why do we need to create nano kinds of machines? Right? So we'll be discussing those things within our next chapter, my dear children. Right? So I'm going to wind up this chapter with this part. So I hope to meet you with our next chapter to discuss further things related to the lesson.
To watch these important lessons, subscribe to DP Education's YouTube channel right now. Click on the bell icon to stay updated on the latest lessons. Sri Lanka's largest free online school, DP Education.